The suspected double murder and suicide at a house outside the village of Lixnaw in North Kerry is the main story for many papers. The deaths of 3 members of one family were described by Kerry TD Michael Healy-Rae as shocking and beyond belief, as the Irish Daily Mirror reports. A photograph of the Defence Forces searching a field at Moy Ross in Limerick City dominates the front page of the Irish Sun. The paper's subhead sums up the targeting of organised criminals. 300 cops and the army launch huge raids on crime mob and seize cash, bling, horses, luxury cars and drugs. A larger version of the photograph of members of the Defence Forces is carried on the Irish Examiner's front page, credited to Brendan Gleeson. That paper leads with a report that a primary school principal who had to contact families directly to alert them about a COVID-19 case at the school has urged the Health Service executive to move faster to help schools with outbreaks. The intervention of Damien White of Scull Hinkle in Tullamore, County Offaly, comes as the World Health Organisation's Dr. Mike Ryan calls on governments to help schools so that they can stay open this winter, the Examiner says. COVID and schools provide the lead story for the Irish Times too. The paper reports that school children who are close contacts of COVID-19 cases would no longer have to self-isolate if they showed no symptoms, under changes being considered by health officials. With the testing system coming under extreme pressure, public health specialists are pressing for a relaxation of rules that require them to stay at home for at least 10 days, the paper says. The Times is the only paper to run the Zappone affair on its front page. The paper reports that the Oireachtas Committee on Foreign Affairs is expected to invite former Minister Catherine Zappone to answer questions about her abandoned appointment as a UN Special Envoy. Committee members want to hear her reaction to the assertion by the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, yesterday that she was mistaken to believe she had been offered the job last March before the role had been considered by officials in his department. However, the Times says it is not clear if Ms. Zappone will accept an invitation. She did not respond to efforts by the paper to contact her yesterday. There is much attention given to the number of Leaving Cert students who achieved the maximum 625 points. Their number rocketed to 1,342 this year, more than double the 2020 figure and a 6-fold increase on 2019, said The Independent. Delight and disappointment greeted the CAO offers, writes John Walsh. 2 groups were particularly upset: the high achievers who did not get their first preference, and many of the 21,000 plus who sat the exam in previous years.
We're going first to County Kerry this morning to talk about that awful news from overnight, the deaths of 3 people from one family near the village of Lixnaw. Our Southern editor Paschal Sheehy joins us. Paschal, will you take us through what is known about what happened at this point?
Well, this tragedy unfolded at a place called Ballyrehan, which is like a little village itself. It consists of about a dozen houses in between a necklace of 3 villages, Lixnaw, Kilflynn and Abbeydorney, between Tralee and Listowel in North Kerry. Gardaí were called to the bungalow home of the family involved at around 9 o'clock last night. Inside the house they found the body of a woman in her 60s and her 23-year-old son, and the woman's partner was missing at that stage. So a search commenced and Gardaí prepared for contingencies given that there was a firearm licensed to the house, that a live incident could have been taking place. So they mobilised the armed response unit from Cork, and they were making their way at speed from Cork when the man's body, he's a man in his 60s, was discovered close to a neighbour's house, and a firearm was located close by.
And Paschal, what have the Gardaí been saying about this incident?
Well, Gardaí confirmed that they were at an incident. They released a statement at around 11 o'clock last night confirming that they were at an incident at a house in North Kerry. They didn't name the locality or the village of Lixnaw. They confirmed that they had located the body of a woman in her 60s and her son in his 20s inside the house, and that the body of a man in his 60s was located outside. Gardaí have confirmed that all three have gunshot wounds and that a firearm was recovered from the scene. Now, they say they have informed the State Pathologist's office and they're expecting a pathologist to visit the scene today along with members of the Garda Technical Bureau. They would be expected here maybe around lunchtime, slightly after it. Critically, the Garda statement says they're not looking for anyone else in relation to this incident, and my own information is that it is being treated as a double homicide and suicide at this stage. But of course there is we are in the early hours of what will be a very complex investigation, and an investigation that will take place over some months. Gardaí have a lot of work to do before they confirm the suspicion on which they are operating at the moment. Ballistic testing will have to be done on the gun. House-to-house inquiries will have to be conducted in the area. It is known at this stage that there were a number of callers to the house throughout the day yesterday and that no reply was received. But that doesn't really tell them much at this stage, and they must dig much further below the surface before they can piece together the jigsaw that will make up this tragedy. And behind it as well, it's important to note that this is a huge tragedy for a family that are waking up to this news this morning, perhaps got knocks on the door or telephone calls during the night to inform them of the very sad news, and it will be a devastating blow for this very tightly knit community in North Kerry. They are divided in their hurling. There are small pockets and communities that are absolutely devout in their support of hurling in North Kerry, but they're united in every other way, and this community is part of that wider community, and this is the news that they are waking up to today.
And is there anything at this stage more known about the family at the centre of it?
Well, there is a lot about the family, but nothing that would indicate that something like this was about to happen or might happen. The man in his 60s who was found did a little bit of farming. He kept sheep. He, a number of years ago, used to drive buses part-time. He drove trucks. His wife is from the Ballyrehan area outside of Lixnaw, and they would be regarded, they're there for so long, they would be regarded as native to the area. But they have family and extended family are all around the North Kerry area. Their 23-year-old son worked with a number of agricultural contractors. I understand he worked at the Lieber crane factory in Killarney, which is about 20 or 30 miles away, maybe about 40 kilometres away. But there was nothing that stuck out to anybody that I spoke to, certainly last night and in the early hours of this morning, that would indicate that anything like this was in the offing.
OK, Paschal Sheehy, thank you very much indeed. Our Southern editor joining us there on that tragic news from County Kerry overnight.
Well, it's around 2 weeks since schools started to return, but already there are around 14,000 children out of the classroom as a result of being a close contact of a confirmed case of COVID-19. The Irish National Teachers Organisation is calling for the HSE's Principals Helpline to be better resourced to help manage the surge in exposures. Simon Lewis, principal of the Educate Together Primary School in Carlow Town, describes his frustration with the current system.
To be honest, it's an extremely frustrating situation. If we receive a message of a confirmed case after 4:30 in the afternoon, we as principals have to wait until 9 o'clock the next morning before we can actually get through to the special principal line that was set up. And even when we do get through to that after 9 o'clock, we have to wait up to 24 hours after we give a small amount of information for contact tracing to actually happen. So a huge amount of time passes, and which will put children in vulnerable positions before we even get to start the contact tracing with public health. I think it's time that we had, at the very minimum, a 24-hour helpline or tracking line for primary schools. There's so many cases that even for the short time while we're in the middle of this Delta wave, I think it's the minimum we could be expecting.
Simon Lewis, principal of the Educate Together primary school in Carlow Town. Donncha O'Leary, Sinn Féin spokesperson on education, is on the line. Good morning.
Good morning, Samantha.
Deputy O'Leary, you heard that principal there talking about the frustrations of trying to deal with these high numbers of cases. Do you think a 24/7 helpline is a feasible option for them?
I do. First, I know I'm not on to talk about it, but I'd just like to very briefly say I think my, the reports from Lixnaw are tragic altogether, and my thoughts go out to the family and to the community in North Kerry. I absolutely agree with Simon. Look, ever since the last week and a half, and we are very early in the school year, September is a very busy time for principals and boards of management. And ever since then, I've been inundated with calls and emails from principals and school leaders who are just so frustrated. And before in the spring, when we were dealing with that wave, I and others and a lot of teachers demanded that there was a dedicated schools-based tracking tracing team or tracing teams. That seems to be very absent now. The helpline is impossible to get through, and this leads to situations like if you have COVID cases in a school, understandably parents will be demanding to know what's going on. The community will want to know what's going on, and you have a principal that's basically been left hanging by the HSE because they're waiting 2-3 hours on a helpline. Even when they get the information, they're being asked to do a lot of themselves. Effectively, what's happening here is a lot of the public health work seems to be being outsourced to principals who are, in September trying to get their schools up and running and leading teaching and learning. So, the burden that's being put on school leaders here is actually damaging their ability to deliver quality education. I think that's not good enough. We need to ensure that the school tracing teams are adequately resourced, and that should involve a full-time helpline.
The Irish Times is reporting this morning that there's consideration to changing the rules so that school children who are close contacts wouldn't have to isolate unless they're showing symptoms. Would you support that move, or should we wait a bit longer to see how the virus is spreading in schools?
Yeah, well, look, obviously this is news that just broke this morning, so I'll need to carefully consider that. I only had sight of that there about 20 minutes ago, and it's not something that I or Sinn Féin had been seeking, and it's still being considered by NPHET. So these are papers before NPHET, but not decided upon. So obviously we would give it consideration. Clearly there's a balance to be struck here. I think in the past, too few people seem to be identified as close contacts in schools to the point that it was almost fictional. But you could have also too many causing the system to be completely overwhelmed. So look, when NPHET come to a conclusion, we'll accept the public health advice. If public health advice believes that these steps that are being considered, that they're adequate to minimise transmission, then we'll accept that. But they haven't done that as yet. But what this also points to me, I suppose, is that I would have a concern that yet again, for the third or fourth time, that our testing and particularly tracing system seems to be becoming overwhelmed, which is something that Sinn Féin has been identifying as just central here. And look, it's not just Sinn Féin, the WHO, and I think anyone involved in public health is saying that our public health system is not properly resourced to deal with this pandemic, to deal with this wave, and our testing and tracing system seems to be being overwhelmed, particularly when it comes to tracing at this point in time. And that's definitely the experience we're getting from schools. They can't access what was the school's tracing team. I've actually been told in some instances that they're being told that this is gone. I've written to HSE to clarify that, because if that's the case, that's unacceptable. But even if they are there, they seem to be impossible to reach. So as for this new advice, as I say, if it's accepted by NPHET, of course we'll accept that, but it hasn't been done yet. And we need to be confident that the public health advice is that this is adequate to minimise transmission, because there's a balance to be struck here, so it needs to be properly backed up by public health.
Can I ask you about the Leaving Cert? The chairman of the CAO was quoted this morning as saying that the grade inflation in this year's Leaving Cert exams are cruel. Are you concerned about the fact that so many students missed out this year on what they were looking for, and the impact that could have on next year's Leaving Cert and the demand for places?
Of course, and I'm also concerned about those who sat Leaving Cert in 2019 and before that, who were trying to apply this year. I think it was about 20,000 or so who were looking to apply this year. We actually met Simon Harris, myself, and our spokesperson on higher education, Rose Conlon Walsh, outlining a number of solutions in May, asking him to consider that to ensure that those who had done the Leaving Cert in previous years could be could have a fair crack at getting into courses this year. I accept, like we are in very difficult situations, and I think the Leaving Cert solution, challenging as it was for everyone involved, I think was ultimately the right approach given the learning loss that has been experienced. But clearly we needed to ensure that there was adequate third level places. And I think, it's hard not to consider at this point in time the fact that this year's Leaving Cert students, I suppose they're beginning their very stressful school year now, and they're, I suppose, terrified that they are going to find it impossible to get into third level courses. So I think we need a strategy, and we'll be happy to work with Minister Harris and Minister Foley on this. We need a strategy to deal with what is probably a temporary spike in points, and I think that potentially involves ratios in terms of previous applicants and current applicants, and ensuring that is managed in terms of places, but also ensuring that those high demand courses that we try and create additional places.
OK, before I let you go, Sinn Féin yesterday accused the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, of creating a cock and bull story about the appointment of Catherine Zappone to a UN Special Envoy role. But the Taoiseach seems to have accepted his account of what happened to you.
Oh, listen, I think anyone watching that, it was ludicrous. It was laughable. There was no credibility to it whatsoever. And the Taoiseach statement, it wasn't even the Taoiseach statement. It was a statement from a spokesperson. We need to hear from the Taoiseach himself. Does he believe, I don't think most of the public do, does he believe Simon Coveney's version of events, that the destruction of departmental records is okay, that he's happy to stand over cronyism in government? So I think there's a lot of issues here for the Taoiseach to deal with. He needs to deal with the appointment of a made-up job, the cover-up, people being taken for fools, which is what's happening, and the deleting of these records, because this is a government rapidly out of control with no accountability, and the Taoiseach does need to make a clear statement himself. Does he believe Simon Coveney? Because, as I say, I don't think that the public does. I think it's unbelievable. I think it's ludicrous, frankly.
And are Sinn Féin going to table a motion of no confidence in him?
Well, look, all options are on the table, including that. But at this point in time, we're looking for the former Minister Zappone to come before the committee, because I actually think, what Simon Coveney said last night, tried to portray her as somebody who didn't know what was going on, even though, I worked with her when I was a spokesperson on children, and I didn't agree with her on everything, but she was a competent woman, despite my difficulties with this current challenge. So I would like to see her set the record straight in terms of what Simon Coveney was saying yesterday. But look, all options are on the table. What we need to hear from first is to hear from the Taoiseach. Does he believe Simon Coveney? The public does not. It's not an account that is credible. I certainly don't. And a short, brief statement from a spokesperson on behalf of the Taoiseach is not adequate. He is head of government, and he is responsible for how the government is held accountable, including Simon Coveney. OK,
Donncha O'Leary, Sinn Féin spokesperson on education. Thank you.
The Taliban's caretaker government will, unsurprisingly perhaps, be made up entirely of men. It will include a man on the FBI's most wanted list, and several of them were members of the Taliban in the 1990s. The interim government will be led by Mullah Mohammed Hassan Akhund, who is on a UN blacklist. In the past 24 hours, Taliban militants shot dead 3 protesters in the western city of Herat. The symmetry of the Taliban returning to power 20 years after the United States and its allies invaded Afghanistan and removed them from power is not lost on anyone, and has led to many asking what was achieved by the last 2 decades. The invasion was sparked by the attacks in the United States on 9/11, so RTE's Fiona Mitchell has been looking at whether or not the world is any safer now than it was in 2001.
I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Then US President George W. Bush speaking at the Twin Towers site in New York in the aftermath of 9/11. Retaliation against those responsible led the US to Afghanistan, where Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda network had been sheltered by the Taliban. 20 years on, the Taliban is back in power. Western governments now forced to navigate a new relationship. Ibrahim Bahis is an Afghanistan expert with International Crisis Group.
Some countries, regional countries particularly, say that they have to deal with the Taliban regardless of whether they came to power by force. It is here to stay. It is likely to remain a dominant political force in the country, so we have to find a way to deal with it. And an unstable or neglected Afghanistan is likely to breed more problems than solve it. And I think that sentiment in the West, more generally in the US, EU, and other countries, that sentiment is shared that the isolationist policy of the 1990s is likely to prove counterproductive, if for nothing else, for counterterrorism.
Those security and counter-terrorism issues are what brought the US into Afghanistan in the first place. The chaos of recent weeks has left many questioning whether that involvement was futile. Kate Clark is co-director of the Afghan Analysts Network.
Things have been achieved, like children going to school, mass education, particularly of girls, huge falls in the number of children surviving into infancy, the number of women surviving childbirth. You can measure the indicators. On the other hand, it should have been so much better. And, even something like all the aid, which has promoted those indicators, has also stymied Afghanistan's economy because it's made it dependent on aid, dependent on money coming from outside, like all the military spending. Now that's gone, the economy is in freefall.
That freefall leaves the country heading for a major humanitarian disaster. Mary Ellen McGroarty is the Afghanistan director of the World Food Programme.
The situation that we have unfolding at the moment is absolutely horrendous and could morph into just a humanitarian catastrophe. We've seen the conflict escalate right across the country, as everyone across the world has seen, displacing over 500,000 people. On top of that, the country is still dealing, like every other country, with the pandemic, new waves of COVID-19.
As the US commemorates 9/11, the events of recent weeks have been a reminder of the ties that bound it to Afghanistan for 2 decades. Ashley Jackson is author of Negotiating Survival, Civilian Insurgent Relations in Afghanistan.
I think a lot of my fellow countrymen have forgot about the war until the Taliban took over the country, right? Until it returned to the front pages. And so it's hard to know what the worth was to us. Did it keep us safer? Well, there's really no way of knowing that. Certainly, we've developed a mentality of fear around whether it's from traveling on airplanes to whatever it is, that we haven't been able to step back from. We're all still in this heightened state of alert and fear and worry about whether or not 9/11 could be repeated, all these kinds of things. The war on terror, for better or worse, continues. And I'm not sure how much safer any of us actually feel. So was it worth it? I think is a very, very difficult question to answer now.
And that report by Fiona Mitchell.
RTE Radio 1 Sport with a Kia e-Niro. Going electric? Stop wondering and start driving. The Kia e-Niro with a range up to 455 kilometres.
Here with the sports news is John Murray. And John, you were in the Aviva last night, a 1-1 draw, but a lot to be hopeful about, not least the performance of our younger players like Gavin Bazunu.
Yes, indeed, Samantha, and we'll get to them in a moment. But as you say, from the brink of defeat, Ireland snatched a late 1-1 draw against Serbia in their European World Cup qualifier. At a hopping Aviva, I'd have to say, even though there were only 25,000 Irish fans there, it felt like the place...
And you could hear it, at home you could hear it.
Yeah, and there was a great warmth, and I suppose because we've been starved of, being at matches of this nature for so long, there was just an enthusiasm there, and I suppose an acceptance that, look, things aren't looking very good from the point of view of, we're officially now unable to qualify for the World Cup, but there was a great deal of enthusiasm there, and a few bars at the fields of Athenry
long overdue.
Yes, indeed. But anyway, we are still languishing second from bottom in Group A, but you would have thought otherwise after the response to Nikola Milenkovic's late own goal in the 86th minute. And Savic had put the Serbs ahead early in the first half, gliding a header past the very impressive Gavin Bazunu in the Irish goal. Indeed, as you say, it was the performances of Bazunu and fellow 19-year-old centre-half Andrew Abamalede that drew the plaudits from the appreciative crowd. We can hear from both of them now. First of all, man of the match, Bazunu.
It was brilliant. I had a lot to do and I was happy I was able to make a few saves in the game, and I was delighted we were able to come out with a result in the end because I think the lads deserved it. We put in a really good performance. I was delighted to be able to contribute my part to the team. That's my job as a goalkeeper, so hopefully I can continue to do it.
Are you sure you're only 19?
100%, yeah.
And Andrew Omabamidele as well, only 19, and what a performance from him tonight.
Yeah, Andrew was unbelievable as well. Like him coming in, only played a couple of games, and the confidence he showed. I think that's what Stephen's trying to do with the squad, to bring young lads in, give them a chance, and you see what happens. The rewards will pay off for us in the future.
It's my first time playing in the Viva with this crowd, and honestly, it was.
I should explain that Captain Fantastic Shane Duffy is helping us with this interview.
But yeah, it's nothing like I've felt before. It was absolutely amazing. Just gives you that extra bit of everything. Even at the end there, when you're a bit tired after running the whole length of the pitch, sprinting back, like I didn't feel tired because the crowd and stuff like that. It's my first time experience, and hopefully many more times to come. We can play. Like I think the nation just have to try their best and keep faith in us. You've seen against Portugal, there's world class players, Ronaldo, Bruno Fernandes, and we went toe to toe with them for the majority of the game. So I think this campaign here, it's obviously been disappointing with the two draws and one loss, but I think we can take a lot from it and keep moving forward.
Yes, indeed. Let's hope so. In the other Group A game, Portugal had a comfortable 3-0 victory away to Azerbaijan to lead the way now on 13 points. Serbia are on 11 points. Luxembourg are on 6. We're on 2. And Azerbaijan are on 1. Elsewhere, Scotland had a crucial 1-0 win away to Austria to move into second place in Group F ahead of Israel. The Scots are on 11 points, 7 adrift of Denmark, who enjoy a 100% record from their 6 games and have yet to concede a goal and have scored 22. Earlier in the European Under-21 Championship qualifiers, Ireland's Under-21s were held to a disappointing 1-1 draw away to Luxembourg. In the US Open tennis, Felix Auger-Aliassime has reached the men's semi-finals after Carlos Alcaraz retired injured 6-3, 3-1 down in their quarter-final. Number 2 seed Daniil Medvedev is through to the semi-finals after a 4-set win over qualifier Botic van de Zand-Schulp. In the women's singles, outsider Canadian Leila Fernandez has reached the semi-finals 1 day after turning 19, the youngest player to do so since Maria Sharapova back in 2005. Fernandez continued her stunning run through the tournament by upsetting number 5 seed Alina Svitolina 6-3, 3-6, 7-6. She will now play number 2 seed Aryna Sabalenka, who defeated French Open champion Barbara Krejcikova 6-1, 6-4 in the opening match of the night session. In Formula 1 news, George Russell has, as expected, been confirmed as Lewis Hamilton's new teammate at Mercedes. And there were joyous scenes at Dublin Airport last night after the remaining Irish Paralympians arrived home from Tokyo. Karen Creed was there for us.
Ellen Keane, congratulations. Has the enormity of your success sunk in? I know you're only minutes back into Dublin Airport.
It hasn't. Like I get like little waves of it sinking in. I think little moments where I'm by myself, it might sink in a little bit more. Even talking to my friends, it sinks in a little bit more.
And I suppose in terms of the question everyone wants to know, what is next for Ellen Keane? Is it rest or is it back to training?
No, it's definitely rest. We've been away for a long time now and it's been a long 5 years, so I just want to take some time to chill out, be a normal person for a few weeks and then back into the pool.
Gary O'Reilly, your first Paralympics and you clinch a bronze medal. You must be absolutely thrilled.
Yeah, I'm just completely still blown away by just even the support from home, and it's hard to get my head around it all, to be honest.
Hayes is my name, I'm Gary's fiance, and I suppose we're all just over the moon. We're so proud of him, and the support we've got from the local community has just been amazing. It's just been out of this world. We're just so proud of him.
Is he aware of the homecoming that's planned for him, or is that all a surprise?
Bits and pieces. I don't know if he knows about all of it, but sure, he'll see you tomorrow.
Kate George-Dunleavy, Eva Crystal, congratulations on all your medals. And is the success sweeter being a joint success, the two of you together?
Absolutely, yeah. I think like I can ride the bike on my own, but it doesn't come close to being able to share these medals with Katie, and both of us are a team, so we've done it together for the last 5, 6, 7 years now. So. Yeah, it's a different feeling. It's amazing.
Yeah. Can I just ask how you'll celebrate? I mean, I'm sure many people want to mark all of these medals that you've won.
I've got a few things with the family. I haven't seen my family for 6 months, my mum, dad, my sister, so I've got a few celebrations here in Dublin, Donegal, and a lot of summer over in the UK as well.
My kids just can't wait to see them. I haven't seen them in 6 weeks. I'm bursting to see them.
Nicole Turner, what an achievement at such a young age, a silver medal. You must be thrilled.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, we're quite tired as it is. We've been away. This is week 6 out of the country, so to actually get back and see our families is amazing.
And how are you going to celebrate? I hope I'm not ruining a surprise by saying I think there is a homecoming happening for you.
You're not ruining any surprises. My mum broke that news to me yesterday.
I'm Bernie, I'm Nicole's mummy. This is her dad, Jason, and we're absolutely ecstatic that we've got her home. We've not seen her for 5 weeks. She's an inspiration to all the young kids out there that have got a disability, that it's not the end of the world. You can look at your sport and you can achieve what she's done.
And that's Nicole Turner's mum talking there to Karen Creed about the arrival home of mainly of the most of our Irish Paralympian team. Well done to them all. There's racing today at Cork. The first is off at 4:05.
The biggest criminal trial in French history begins today. 20 people will go on trial for their role in the attacks of November 13th, 2015, in which 130 people were murdered. 90 of them died during a concert in the Bataclan Theatre in Paris. The rest died when gunmen opened fires in bars, restaurants and the National Football Stadium in the French capital. Later in the programme, we will speak to Kate Healy-Nolan, who, along with her partner David, survived the Bataclan attack. Let's talk now, though, to Paris-based journalist Sharon Gaffney. Sharon, none of us will forget that night, not least of all of those who were in Paris on that night. It was an awful evening.
Yes, and as you say, 130 people killed in those coordinated attacks. The attacks, they began at about 9:20 on that Friday night when a suicide bomber attempted to enter the Stade de France. Many listeners will be familiar with that venue just outside Paris. He detonated an explosive belt after he failed to get into the venue. Now, at around the same time, there was a series of drive-by shootings in Paris. About half a dozen bars and restaurants were targeted by gunmen in the northeast of the city. The attack, of course, culminated at the Bataclan concert venue, where 90 people were killed when gunmen opened fire there. They also took about a dozen people hostage. The attack at the Bataclan, it lasted nearly 3 hours. It eventually came to an end just after midnight, about 12:20, when elite security forces entered the concert hall. So 20 men going on trial here in Paris today. It's being described as the trial of the century here. Obviously traumatic for the families and the survivors, the families of the victims and the survivors. There are at least 1,700 civil parties expected to testify during the trial. It starts today at about 12:30. It's going to go on until at least next May. We're not expecting verdicts until the end of May. Now, here in France, the legal system is a little bit different. So the reason why there are so many people taking part in the trial is that victims or their families, they can file lawsuits and take part in the criminal trial process. There's also over 300 lawyers. We have former President François Hollande, who's also going to be giving evidence. He was in the Stade de France the night of the attack. So, as I say, 20 men going on trial today. Among them is one man who prosecutors say was part of the original cell, the only surviving member of that key group of commandos, as they call them here in France, who carried out the attacks. He's a 31-year-old Belgian man, French citizen, Salah Abdeslam. So,
okay. Yeah, Sharon, we have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed, Sharon Gaffney in Paris on the first day of that trial. And as we say, Kate Healy-Nolan will be joining us a little bit later in the programme.
Samaritans volunteers answered a call for help every 56 seconds last year. According to the organisation's annual impact report, emotional well-being, isolation, loneliness and concerns about COVID were the biggest issues for those who got in touch. Our social affairs correspondent Alva Keneally reports.
It was quite bad. I was at the stage, I was considering different options. I had the number, I found out the number then at that stage. I can't even remember if the volunteer I was speaking at the time was a man, woman, whatever. But it was just, at the time, it was enough for me to speak to them. I think it was nearly 30 minutes, 40 minutes of speaking the first time. But then it just felt low again, and I just lifted up the phone again. It was just so nice to be able to divulge, to get the that issue's out of my head.
6 years ago, Michael Keelan turned to the Samaritans for help.
They just allowed me to, as if I was being heard, I was allowed to get my own story out. I wasn't afraid of having a mask on to keep other people happy. And it was that reset that I needed, that to start again. I felt I was strong enough to be able to bring my life back again, and I decided to give up the taxi driving. I ended up working back in IT, like and working in call centres, building my career back up so I could actually afford to go back to college. So now I'm studying an honours degree in psychotherapy.
Michael has become a Samaritans volunteer.
I was taxi driving at the time, and a lady came up to me and said, the previous year I had her in the car, and she told me that I had changed her life. She recognised me, I didn't recognise her, but the whole story behind it, like obviously whatever I either spoke to her or let her speak about, obviously made a massive difference in her life. And then with my own story, my own experiences, I said, there's something powerful here about that. So that's when I was using the Samaritans, I thought, right, okay, I can probably do this myself and make a difference in somebody else's life. So that's what started me on becoming a volunteer.
And now that you know it from the other side, what approach do you take as a volunteer when someone rings?
Like at first when I became a volunteer, I was very conscious of something maybe triggering me with the calls, after me being actually a Samaritan caller itself. But it wasn't, like, it was like the training was so great that I got. There was just like a light switch just clicked in the head and it was straight into Samaritan. The Samaritans cap was on and it was amazing experience.
As the Samaritans launched their annual report today, Michael says calls about loneliness were prevalent in 2020.
That really kind of came forward a lot with most of the calls. Like a lot of people that would have their daily outings to the shop, post office, stuff like that, that was gone for them, so they hadn't got that outlet. So that was more of the main subject that we were getting on the calls itself, was loneliness.
2,300 volunteers on the island of Ireland answered a call for help every 56 seconds, despite the challenges being posed by the pandemic. Here's the Executive Director, Niall Mulligan.
40% of our volunteers had to cocoon or self-isolate, so the rest had to take up the slack. And they did so, and they stepped up and they did 2, 3, possibly even 4 shifts a week. So that made a massive difference to us. It kept us up going 24/7. But yeah, it was a real challenge for both our volunteers and our callers.
For those who may be struggling, Michael has this advice.
Don't bottle it up. Just open up, reach out to somebody, if it's a sibling, a parent, a friend, anyone. And if you don't have that, reach out to us at the Samaritans. Never bottle it up. You're not alone, and like the saying, this too shall pass. It always does pass.
Samaritans Drogheda branch volunteer Michael Keelan, ending that report by Alva Keneally. And if you or anyone you know may be seeking support, the Samaritans helpline is 116123.
Rising costs are a significant issue for businesses, according to 2 reports today, with many expecting to pass the costs on to consumers. Professional services firm IFAC reports that 7 in 10 SMEs in the agri-food sector are experiencing higher costs. David Layden, head of food and agri-business at IFAC, joins us now. So where are agri-business companies feeling the pinch on the cost front, David?
Good morning, Brian. So they're feeling the pinch across a number of areas. For food companies, it's around packaging and ingredients. For agri-businesses, steel and timber are very much increasing, and that's past the costs are beginning to be felt by the consumer or the farmer customer.
Has the pandemic had an impact here, or is this mainly a Brexit impact coming through?
Well, there's a global commodity price increase. So we're seeing commodity prices across the globe increase, and COVID has definitely had an impact. Even the Suez Canal, remember when the ship was locked in the Suez Canal, that had an impact, and Brexit has an impact. So we see that 64% of the businesses that we surveyed have been negatively affected by Brexit. And again, this is the small and medium-sized businesses in the food and agribusiness sector. And the problems that they're facing with Brexit is transport disruption and tariffs are big problems.
And this is likely to translate into higher food prices, you reckon?
We expect higher food prices, and we expect higher prices for farmers across a range of areas. There's no question about that, because even in the machinery sector in the last year, we've seen multiple price increases delivered to farmers over the period of time, because steel in particular has increased so dramatically.
And despite all this, businesses in the sector they're pretty optimistic about the outlook. Is there a large degree of relief there after a few tough years?
Yeah, there's definitely relief. Like if you think about this time last year when we conducted the survey, we were pretty deep in COVID. Food service was questionable about what was going to happen. We didn't have vaccinations. So food service opening up has definitely helped the food companies in terms of optimism. And for the agri-businesses, we do see that farm gate prices are strong at the moment. So dairy prices, beef, lamb prices are strong. So that's helping the agri-businesses that supply into the farmer sector.
Now, we saw Fáilte Ireland last week launching a campaign to try to attract workers into the tourism and hospitality sectors. It's an issue for many sectors. Is it the same for agribusiness?
It is. And 98% or nearly every food and agribusiness plans to maintain or grow employee numbers over the next year. But 2/3 of them are finding it difficult to recruit. And Brian, it's people across the whole gamut of that you need to run a business. So it's people in production, in manufacturing, it's welders, it's finance professionals, it's marketing professionals. So there's a lot of challenges there in recruiting the right team to help you grow your business. And that's really, 2/3 of businesses are finding that at the moment.
David Layton of IFAC, thank you very much.
The suspected suicide and double murder at a house outside the village of Lixnaw in North Kerry is the main story for many papers. The deaths of 3 members of one family were described by Kerry TD Michael Healy-Rae as shocking and beyond belief, as the Irish Daily Mirror reports. There's a photograph of the Defence Forces searching a field at Moy-Ross in Limerick City on the front page of the Irish Sun. The paper's subhead sums up the targeting of organised criminals. 300 cops and the army launch huge raids on crime mob and seize cash, bling, horses, luxury cars and drugs. A larger version of that photograph of members of the Defence Forces is carried on the Irish Examiner's front page, credited to Brendan Gleeson. That paper leads with the report that a primary school principal who had to contact families directly to alert them about a COVID-19 case at the school has urged the Health Service executive to move faster to help schools with outbreaks. The intervention of Damien White of Scull Hinkle in Tullamore, County Offaly, comes as the World Health Organisation's Dr. Mike Ryan calls on governments to help schools so that they can stay open this winter, the Examiner says. COVID and schools provide the lead story for the Irish Times too. The paper reports that school children who are close contacts of COVID-19 cases would no longer have to self-isolate if they showed no symptoms, under changes being considered by health officials. There is much attention given to the numbers of Leaving Cert students who achieved the maximum 625 points. Their number rocketed to 1,342 this year, more than double the 2020 figure, and a 6-fold increase on 2019, says The Independent. Delight and disappointment greeted the CAO offers, writes John Walsh. 2 groups were particularly upset: the high achievers who did not get their first preference, and many of the 21,000 plus who sat the exam in previous years. The Times is the only paper to run the Zappone affair on its front page. The paper reports that the Oireachtas Committee on Foreign Affairs is expected to invite former Minister Catherine Zappone to answer questions about her abandoned appointment as a UN Special Envoy. Committee members want to hear her reaction to the assertion by the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, yesterday that she was mistaken to believe she had been offered the job last March, before the role had been considered by officials in his department. However, the Times says it is not clear if Ms Zappone will accept an invitation. She did not respond to efforts by the paper to contact her yesterday. The Independent comments on yesterday's proceedings that when he needed to be crystal clear, Mr Coveney's interpretation of matters gave rise to a new set of questions and inconsistencies. The affair is a debacle of his own making, says the Times. The Examiner, in an editorial, pays tribute to what it calls 2 bad guys from the world of film and TV who died this week: Jean-Paul Belmondo and Michael K. Williams. Williams, the paper says, cut a mesmerising figure as the gay Baltimore stick-up boy Omar Little in the compelling TV series The Wire. This was partly because of the street nobility he displayed and his ability to turn a phrase. Little's menacing "You come at the king, you best not miss," the paper says, has entered the modern compendium of catchphrases for deployment in sport, entertainment and politics.
Now to our southern editor Paschal Sheehy to talk about that horrific attack in County Kerry which has left 3 members of one family dead. Paschal, you're joining us from the village of Lixnaw. What do we know about what happened near there yesterday?
Well, the scene at Ballyrehan is around 5 kilometres outside the village, and just to set the scene, you were talking about, as I described it earlier, a necklace of villages in between Listowel to the north and Tralee to the south, and that necklace of villages consists of Lixnaw, Kilflynn and Abbeydorney. And the townland of Ballyrehan is a little knot of maybe 12 houses very close to each other for a rural area in between the village of Lixnaw and Kilflynn. And the alarm was raised at around 9 o'clock last night. Gardaí were called to the scene, to the bungalow home of the family involved here. And when they entered, they found the body of a woman in her 60s. And elsewhere in the house, the body of her 23-year-old son. Now, the woman's partner was missing at that stage, so a search began and contingencies were put in place because there is a firearm licence to the house for armed Gardaí to join that search. The armed response unit were on their way from Cork when they were stood down a short time afterwards, when the man who was in his 60s, his body was found near a neighbouring house, in between his own house and a neighbouring house. So you had 3 people, all from the same family, all dead, and Gardaí confirmed that all 3 of them had gunshot wounds.
And what do the Gardaí believe happened?
Well, at this stage, officially, they're not commenting on that, but they have said critically, I think, that they're not searching for anybody else in relation to this incident. This incident is suspected of being a double homicide, suicide. That is my information is that is how it is being treated at the moment. But Gardaí will go about their investigations with an open mind, and there will be an extensive investigation into this. Bear in mind, we are not yet 12 hours into this investigation. It's not even 12 hours since the alarm was raised last evening. We're talking a lot about it. We appear to know everything, but we don't know everything. Critically, we have no idea why this happened, and there is no known motive for why this happened at this stage.
What's likely to happen today, Paschal?
Well, the Gardaí who were on duty at the scene here, there are 2 scenes, one in the house and one where the man's body was found. They're being relieved. We are expecting door-to-door inquiries to get underway here shortly. Members of the Garda Technical Bureau will be on their way from Dublin. They will conduct a technical examination of the scene at the house and also where the man's body was found. They will also be joined by a pathologist from the State Pathologist's Office who will view the bodies in situ before the bodies are removed to University Hospital Kerry for post-mortem examinations. And all that will go towards what I believe at this stage will be the compilation of a file for the coroner's court for inquests to be held down the line, because I think it is unlikely and has been ruled out officially by the Gardaí at this stage that they are not looking for anybody else in connection with this, and therefore you will not see criminal charges arising out of this investigation, or you are most unlikely to see criminal charges arising out of this investigation. The compilation of the file will be for the coroner's court. That will be many, many months down the line. We may get more answers there, but we may never know why.
And it's the worst possible news for this family's extended family to get. Awful shock and numbness as well, must be for the local community. What do we know at this stage about the family, Paschal?
Well, the community is in shock, and I'm sure that the family are in shock also. They will have been getting phone calls and knocks on their doors, the most unwelcome knock on your door that you could possibly conceive. We know that the man who was in his 60s did a little bit of farming. He kept sheep. He drove buses part-time. He also drove trucks. His partner was from the area, and they had been living at that bungalow for so long that they were both regarded as being native to the area. Their 23-year-old son had worked previously at the Liebherr crane factory in Killarney, but latterly I believe he had been working with agricultural contractors in the area. They would be busy at this time of the year. The community itself is steeped in GAA. It is one of the strongholds of hurling in North Kerry, small pockets of hurling in North Kerry, and in these communities, Lixnaw, Kilflynn, Abbeydorney, Crotta, Kilmoyley, Ballyhaig, hurling is the number one game over even Gaelic football, for which Kerry is famous. And as I was saying earlier, these communities may well be divided, deeply divided when it comes to hurling and GAA affairs, but they're deeply united also. And this is a community that in the days and weeks ahead will be leaning on each other and relying on each other for support, and maybe for answers and explanations as well, although they may not be forthcoming.
Paschal, thank you very much indeed. Paschal Sheehy, our Southern editor.
Yesterday, Sinn Féin hinted it may table a no-confidence motion in the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, over the Catherine Zappone controversy, but it wants to see what Fianna Fáil leader and Taoiseach Micheál Martin does first. But what do Fianna Fáil members want the Taoiseach to do? Fiachra O'Keoney has been speaking with TDs and senators, starting with Cork East TD James O'Connor.
Look, from my perspective here, I think it is very important for Simon Coveney to do the right thing. He needs to apologise when the Dáil returns next week to the public, to the country, for an incident that has dragged the government and the Department of Foreign Affairs into disrepute. I think it's very important that there would be full clarification when the Dáil returns next week, and for a public apology to be made by Minister Coveney.
Sinn Féin said it's considering placing a no-confidence motion, but it wants to see what Fianna Fáil leader and Taoiseach Micheál Martin will do first. In your view as a Fianna Fáil backbencher, what should Taoiseach Micheál Martin do?
Look, I can only speak in my capacity as a Fianna Fáil TD, and I think to paraphrase Othello, Simon Coveney has done the state some service. I think the idea of a resignation, which has been touted by some, would not be in the national interest. As Minister for Foreign Affairs, he has done good work, but I am significantly disappointed as a backbench TD, and we need to see better from the Fine Gael party. I think it's important that the Taoiseach should seek Minister Coveney to make a public apology, an apology to the people of the country, and to do what is the right thing. I don't think seeking resignations for the sake of it or putting down motions of no confidence are acceptable at this point in time. So I think I want to give Minister Coveney the latitude to make that statement before the Dáil, which I think is the right thing to do.
Senator Malcolm Byrne, Gorey, County Wexford. There's a lot of anger in Fianna Fáil over the Zappone affair, particularly given that last week we launched Housing for All, one of the major reasons why Fianna Fáil went into government to address the housing crisis, and to a certain extent that was overshadowed. I'm glad the Minister has apologised to the Oireachtas Foreign Affairs Committee, and it wasn't right that the Taoiseach was blindsided. Simon Coveney has to come in to the Dáil, make a statement and publicly apologise for what has happened.
James Lawless, Fianna Fáil TD for North Kildare and Chair of the Justice Committee. I thought his performance at the committee yesterday was an improvement on the previous week. He was more contrite, but I'm really surprised and disappointed that a minister of his experience is dropping the ball over what should have been a simple procedure. His inability to grasp the rules of FOI in terms of deleting text, his struggle to manage Catherine Zappone's obvious ambition, and the fact he didn't have the Taoiseach for 5 months. And as I say, somebody who's in the role that he's in for 10 years at Cabinet and 23 years in public life, it does make me think, if he fluffs something like this, what might he do on something more serious?
Your party leader, Micheál Martin, is also Taoiseach, so should he take action against Simon Coveney?
The Taoiseach is going to have to take matters in hand. There is a convention within coalition governments, however, that the individual parties manage their own affairs, and really the onus falls on Leo Varadkar as leader of Fine Gael to take action here if action is needed, because that is how coalition governments work. And this is very much a Fine Gael affair from start to finish. It's Fine Gael ministers, it's Leo Varadkar, it's Simon Coveney, Paschal Donoghue on the periphery. So it's very much a Fine Gael family at war. I suppose the onus falls on Fine Gael to sort out their own mess on this occasion.
Fianna Fáil TD for Kildare North, James Lawless, ending that report by Fiachra O'Keoney. Let's talk now to our political correspondent, Paul Cunningham. Paul, you heard there from some Fianna Fáil members. They're not exactly happy campers, but they're not going as far as calling for Simon Coveney's head.
That's right, Samantha. I mean, for many in Fianna Fáil, they're smarting because they feel this is a Fine Gael mess, which Fianna Fáil has been dragged into over the past number of weeks. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they feel if anything needs to be done, it's Fine Gael who should be doing. If there's more sackcloth to be worn, then Minister Coveney is the person who can wear it. I mean, it is an awkward moment for the party, which is just about to have its pre-Dáil think-in session tomorrow in County Cavan. It was already going to be a difficult meeting given some unhappiness over performances in the general election, in the Dublin South by-election or Dublin Bay South by-election, and also a somewhat difficult year in government. And the Taoiseach Micheál Martin is therefore walking something of a tightrope between balancing the need to hold the government together while also at the same time keeping his own troops on board. As you heard from Fiach's report, it's a difficult job.
Yesterday, Simon Coveney, he was contrite and he apologised for what he described as his sloppiness, but he doggedly stuck to his story despite the disbelief from many members. Did he do enough to put this issue to bed?
I think that what he's managed to do is to contain it for the moment. I mean, as you say, he's got a narrative, he's stuck to it. So the question now is over the coming week whether or not anything new comes out which challenges that narrative. For example, does Catherine Zappone opt to go before the Oireachtas Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee? Most members don't think she will, and she can't be compelled. But if she was to go forward and if she was to challenge Mr. Coveney's narrative, there would be a problem then. So basically what we're doing is waiting to see if something new comes out, a surprise, I guess you could call it.
Are there any more questions to be answered, such as the issue about deleting government texts? He said he wouldn't delete them if it involved current government business, but that if that business concluded, he did.
Yeah, I mean, once again, Minister Coveney has a narrative and he stuck to it. We do have people like Paul Murphy of People Before Profit, who's written to the Information Commissioner seeking an investigation. So there's possible new lines of inquiry there. But I mean, the big one, I guess, is whether Catherine Zappone chooses to fill in some blanks. That text message in early March where it seems that she clearly believed she had a job, but Mr. Coveney said it was only a concept at that stage. So, I mean, I think it strikes me that in the absence of Miss Zappone, this row has basically left the realm of the committee room and it's moved into the broader political realm. And you can see that from Sinn Féin as they're casting judgment, a very negative judgment on Mr. Coveney's narrative, and then demanding that the Taoiseach state whether or not he backs him. So I think we're moving more into that area.
And the Taoiseach did release a short statement last night through a spokesperson. What did it say?
Well, basically, it struck me is that he's trying to, reading between the lines, he's trying to draw a line under this. We said basically that the approach to the UN job was wrong, lessons needed to be learned, and then went on to say what that meant. Any special envoys will now have to go through open competition, and there's going to be a full review of the envoys too. And then there's also that line, there can be no doubt in the public's mind about how appointments are made by government in future. The spokesperson for the Taoiseach noted that Mr. Coveney had apologised and that he'd given his account to the committee. But I guess that as Mr. Martin goes into Cabinet today, and if he does stop and speak to journalists, and he is going to be asked whether he wants to give a full-throated backing to Mr. Coveney.
Sinn Féin are hinting at a motion of no confidence, but are they or anybody else likely to pull the trigger?
Yeah, I mean, I think the focus really is on Sinn Féin. Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the party, John Brady, said that all options remain on the table when he was speaking to journalists yesterday afternoon, including the nuclear button of a no confidence motion. But the party also is saying that it's waiting and watching, once again waiting to see if the narrative put forward by Minister Coveney has been challenged. So I think we're basically in a holding pattern at the moment. And to a certain extent, that actually helps Sinn Féin as they're keeping the heat on both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael ahead of their thinkings. I mean, Fianna Fáil's one is first up in Cavan. A big review of party performance is due there, and at the same time You know, Sinn Féin is keeping the heat under them over the performance of Simon Coveney, over Micheál Martin, over what he's going to do. But my gut feeling on this, Samantha, is that the longer Sinn Féin sits on this, and in the absence of any new information, the less likely it comes, it seems to me, less likely that they're going to pull that trigger.
RT's political correspondent Paul Cunningham, thank you. Now, as you've been hearing in the bulletin, the HSE has suspended the walk-in COVID-19 testing services. For more on this, we're joined by RT's health correspondent Fergal Bowers. Fergal, why has this testing been suspended?
Well, swabbing has gone up by 35% in recent days. Yesterday, the HSE swabbing centres did 19,000 swabs. On Monday, they did 20,800. That's the highest number on a single day this year, only broken on 2 days of last year, December 30th and 31st, when they went well past 20,000. So obviously, there is big demand, so the HSE has suspended the option of walking in for swabbing into these centres from today. They say it's to reduce queues. It's not about capacity, but it's to speed up the process. They don't want very large queues of people building. So people are being urged to book online from today if they want to get tests.
And some walk-ins will be accepted.
Some walk-ins will be accepted for certain people that are clearly ill. But if you look at the figures, 14,000 children are now restricting their movements because they have been identified as a close contact of a confirmed case. That's up from 12,000 on Monday. So 809 primary schools have reported a case of COVID-19, and 520 secondary schools have reported a case of COVID-19. It's a challenge for families and for children because obviously it has a significant impact on families if children have to self-isolate for 10 days awaiting the testing. And, it does mean for some parents they may be unable to go to work. So for employers too, that causes difficulty. Health officials are looking at possibly the need to change the system so that if a child has no symptoms, they wouldn't have to restrict their movements. Now, and of course, vaccinated children don't have to self-isolate if they're deemed a close contact. But of course, vaccination is only available to people aged 12 years and older. So, many children are not and cannot be vaccinated.
OK, RTE's health correspondent Fergal Bowers, thanks for that update.
RTE Radio 1 Sport with a Kia e-Niro. Going electric? Stop wondering and start driving. The Kia e-Niro with a range up to 455 kilometres.
Sports news now. Good morning again, John Murray.
Good morning to you, Samantha. So what to make of our 1-1 draw against Serbia in last night's World Cup qualifier at the Aviva? To the facts of the game first. Savic put the Serbs ahead after 20 minutes and Ireland drew level thanks to an own goal from Milinkovic on 86. In truth, the visitors dominated for long periods and we can thank man of the match 19-year-old Gavin Bazunu for keeping the Serbs to a single goal. It leaves us with just 2 points from a possible 15, 1 point ahead of Azerbaijan. In a moment we'll be getting the thoughts of Stephen Elliott, but first let's get those of one of our best players on the night, right wing back. Matt Doherty spoke to Tony O'Donoghue.
Trying to play out even at 1-0 down with 5-6 minutes to go. We're still trying to play out and play football kind of the right way. I know people will say, well, you're not getting the results that you want, but if we keep playing the way we have over the last 3 games. I know the Azerbaijan result didn't go our way, but I don't think at time the performances was that bad. Just couldn't take our chances. So look, if we keep trying to play the right way, I'm pretty sure the results will come. But I know I've been saying that for a while.
For a year and longer really, you've had to play without crowds. The difference the crowd here at the Aviva tonight made?
Oh, unbelievable. Look, I know it wasn't a full house, but it felt like it towards the end. I think for every player really, crowds makes a big difference to their game. Kind of takes their concentration or something, kind of takes it up a level, especially when you've got your family who people haven't seen for a long time, able to come to the game. I know we still can't see them now, but at least they're in the stand and able to watch you play football again. So just little things like that make a big difference.
Does this show the belief from the squad in the manager and the manager's methods?
Look, we've always believed in what Stephen's trying to do. We get coached brilliantly. with Anthony Barry also and Keith Andrews, all the backroom staff. We have no complaints at all. The game plans they set us up with are really good. If you saw what they doing with us on the training pitch, then people would really understand where we're trying to go. We have really top class coaches there. So, like I said, I think if we keep trying to play the right way, you could see against Portugal, again against tonight, we can play against some of these top nations and not look out of place. So we'll keep doing the right things.
And that's Matt Doherty there talking to Tony. Well, Stephen Elliott joins us now. Your thoughts this morning, Stephen?
I'm happy to my overall thoughts is I'm happy for the squad. I'm happy for Stephen to actually get the point. I think, listen, we all watched the game. We rode a look at times. I think the keeper was outstanding. Gavin DeZuna, some of the saves he made. I think he's been really good in all the games, if I'm honest, John. But I think last night especially, he really came up trumps. And yeah, I listened to Matt speak there, and certain things he said I would definitely agree with. I think the team did try and play out at times, especially in the first half, and that we're out really kind of in Serbia. We must say Serbia did have a lot of the ball as well, and they're a good team, Serbia. So we did ride a look, but the fact that we were still in the game with like 15-20 minutes to go, and I really think the crowd helped the team. I mentioned the crowd there. I think the noise of the crowd, you could sense it there. There was something there, and it kind of the players reacted to it well. And if anything, we gave it a right good go in the last 15-20 minutes, and I know the goal was probably one of the scrappiest goals we're ever going to see, but maybe we deserved that little bit of luck after kind of the Portugal game, obviously losing the 2 late goals, and obviously Azerbaijan was a pretty difficult one to take, but maybe sometimes you deserve that little bit of luck, and to come away with a draw, and we could have won the game as well with Shane Duffy's header right late on, that he maybe should have done better. He'd probably be a little bit disappointed himself, because that's usually his kind of forte, kind of getting up and scoring them headers. But no, a point after, if you watch that game and you come away with a point, you got to be happy and you got to move forward. Listen, I obviously results, we want to win some games soon, and I still think there's a few things that need to be tweaked regarding how we're playing with the players we've got to hand. But no, you're looking at positives, and to get a draw at home against a Serbian team who are very good on the night, very, very good, stayed in the game and stuck with it, and sometimes you get your just rewards.
Now, we're out of contention for qualification, obviously, but how important are the remaining 3 qualifiers?
I think they are important. We need to get a win. I think Stephen needs a competitive win. I know we spoke about kind of looking to the 2024 campaign, but I still think they'll be eating away, or they'll be eating away at the players, because they've got pride. You want to win international games, especially competitive games, and I think some of the teams we have played, I know you can argue probably on another day we probably would have won them games, but we can't keep talking about it. We need to get a win, and I think for everybody's sake, I think winning a kind of game soon will just be kind of like a big relief for everybody, and then you can kind of move forward without this constant questioning of we're trying to play this way but we're not getting results. And I think the result, winning a game is really important, because it feels like forever since we've won a competitive game, John, and it's a little bit frustrating.
All right, Stephen Elliott, thank you for joining us this morning. In the other Group A game, Portugal had a comfortable 3-0 victory away to Azerbaijan to lead the way on 13 points in the group. Elsewhere, Scotland had a crucial 1-0 win away to Austria to move into second place in Group F. In the US Open tennis, Felix Auger-Aliassime has reached the men's semi-finals after Carlos Alcaraz retired injured 6-3, 3-1 down in their quarter-final. Number 2 seed Daniel Medvedev is through to the semi-finals after a 4-set win over qualifier Botic van de Zandschulp. In the women's singles, outsider Canadian Leylah Fernandez has reached the semi-finals one day after turning 19, the youngest player to do so since Maria Sharapova in 2005. Fernandez continued her stunning run through the tournament by upsetting number 5 seed Elena Svitolina 6-3, 3-6, 7-6. She will now play number 2 seed Arina Sabalenka, who defeated French Open champion Barbara Krejcikova 6-1, 6-4 in the opening match of the night session. There's racing today at Cork. The first is off at 4:05.
November the 13th, 2015, a Friday evening in Paris like many others, until it wasn't. By its end, 130 people would be dead, murdered by terrorists linked to the Islamic State group. The gunmen and suicide bombers went from bars to restaurants to the National Football Stadium, murdering people indiscriminately. They also brought their horror to the Bataclan Theatre, where the Eagles of Death metal band were playing. 90 people died inside that venue in a nightmare that lasted nearly 3 hours. Today, 20 people will go on trial in France for their role in those attacks. We are joined this morning by Katie Healy-Nolan, who, along with her partner David, survived the Bataclan attack. Katie, good morning. You're welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Katie, how are you feeling this morning, thinking about this trial starting in Paris?
It's obviously quite an emotional time in our lives, but it can only be a good thing finally getting the proceedings for justice for the victims of that night.
Will it help you personally in any way, do you think, particularly given that I suppose many of those who were directly involved in the attacks on that evening are dead?
I don't know. I don't think this is going to be something that ever really leaves me personally, and I can only speak for myself, but to have some kind of justice carried out will be a bit of a relief, I suppose, is the only way I can put it. But I don't feel it's something that's ever going to absolve what happened that night, obviously.
How do you feel towards the men who did this?
I don't have any feelings towards the men that did this. There's no space in my life for any kind of hatred or anger towards them. There's no good that can come from that for me or for my family. So I choose not to really think of them and put my focus on the victims and the people who lost their life on the night. They're more important and always will be. So that's why I'm using my voice that I have when I'm asked to speak about the night. I want to use my voice because there's people who had that option taken from them in seconds. So I'm in a position where I can speak, so I will.
And I'm very conscious of asking you to recount a very traumatic event in your life. So I'm not going to do that directly because I know how hard and painful that is. But I will ask you, 6 years on from when it happened, is it in any way easier to deal with?
No, in some respects it's almost like it's hard to believe that it really happened to us and that this is something that has actually happened in our lives. We live with, I honestly can't remember the last time where it hasn't come up in conversation between myself and my husband in any shape or form. It's something that we live with every day. My husband lives with pain due to his injuries. It's very tough. It's something I think of all the time and I never, ever will forget.
And how is David? Because he was shot in the foot, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. He's had several surgeries to, I suppose, rectify what happened, but he will never have the same quality of life that he had, but we're both very aware that he has his life, so we're very grateful for that. But he lives with a great deal of pain. He obviously has other issues arising from the injury to his foot. He has knee pain, back pain. He lives with chronic pain, which is difficult for a young man, but he's just lucky that he has his life, and that's the only way we can look at it.
Did you feel guilty for surviving, Katie?
Well, yes. It was something, when you've kind of made your peace that you're going to die and then you survive, it's a strange thing to kind of come to terms with, but I suppose everybody who was there that night has some degree of guilt because it was such a horrific thing. What we saw will never be forgotten. It can never be forgotten. No amount of therapy or talking about it or not talking about it is ever going to take that away, but I'm extremely lucky and extremely grateful that I did survive, as is David. So again, that's the only thing I can focus on, and trying not to let any kind of guilt creep in too much and to try to live our lives to the fullest as much as we can.
Are you able to sleep, for example? Are you able to go and have a full night's sleep every night without nightmares, without thinking about it?
At times, yes, of course. But it's something that it's always with you. And sometimes when you're kind of having a good run of things, you can get a bit too comfortable, and then something very minuscule will remind you of it, such as if someone takes a photograph with a flash in the corner of a room when you're not expecting it. Things like that, or even just the smell of candles on a birthday cake can be extremely, extremely triggering. Anything that smells kind of sulfuric, it just brings you right back there, and it's got nothing to do with it. So you're never not thinking of it, and even when you're not thinking of it, subconsciously there's something there to remind you.
That sounds like post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people there that night obviously suffer from that, and it's just something that we're learning to live with.
Are you able to go into an enclosed space again?
I have, yes, we have. Like, we've obviously to move forward with your life, and because we have the chance to do so, we have tried to go to concerts and things like that. We went to a very big concert, a Bruce Springsteen concert, quite soon after the event, which was very emotional and strangely difficult to do. It was a completely different setting, but we had to do it to get used to crowds and things like that again. But it's very difficult, and of course going to smaller venues, it's much harder, and it's something that you can go and you can feel fine, but you're always looking at the exits and making sure you know where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about David there, and he's had numerous surgeries. He wasn't able to make that full recovery that he had hoped for back then. And I was reading the account of when you and he escaped from the Bataclan, when you were out on the street, and all the amazing people who helped you that night. Will you tell us about the woman in that apartment who brought you inside?
Yeah, there was a group of people kind of hiding behind railing outside the front of an apartment block, and they saw me dragging David up the street, and obviously seeing that I was speaking English, any French I had completely escaped my memory, and they called us over and let us join their group, and together we got into a foyer of an apartment building. And essentially what the girls did, they basically triaged David there and then, and really helped stop his blood loss. And we really attribute his life being saved to those girls. They were amazing, an amazing group of people.
And there was a doctor who lived in that apartment building as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, when we finally got kind of, I suppose, through the foyer and up to the floors, we were lucky enough there was a GP there, so they were able to help us and keep us calm. And when the streets kind of cleared, they took us in their car and got us to the hospital and got David treatments.
Yeah, and that was incredible in itself, because they would have had no idea what was going on and the dangers all around them as they got you into the car and drove to the hospital.
Yeah, like, I honestly couldn't give you a timeline of how long we were there or how short, but they made sure that the streets seemed calmer, and they got us as soon as they could to help, because there was just no ambulances. Obviously, Paris was going through an incredible event, so we were just exceptionally lucky and forever grateful to them, and they're people we love very much.
And I was listening to a sociologist on radio this morning talking about the trial starting today. It's going to last a very long time, Katie, but she was saying that the hope from many in France is that this was a national trauma which will become a national history, part of France's national history. And that may be good in theory, but that will be hard to achieve, won't it, for the country, but for particularly those like you who were there?
I mean, this was a monumental event in our life, but also for the country of France. What happened was so horrific, and it will be extremely difficult to kind of have it chalked down to the history books and not have it in. It's our living memory, and it will always be with us. It's just extremely hard, and it's almost impossible for me to comment on that. It's just a very difficult subject, really, to be honest with you.
Well, look, we are very grateful to you for taking our call this morning, and we wish you and David and your family all the very best. Thank you very much indeed. Katie Healy-Nolan joining us live there. Now, an error has been discovered in this year's Leaving Certificate grading process. It affects around 1,800 students who sat the Leaving Cert Applied programme. Our education correspondent Emma O'Kelly can tell us more. Emma, what has happened here?
Yes, Audrey, this error came to light when one school contacted the State Examinations Commission. This would be after the results were released on Friday, and they were expressing concern at the grades that their students had received. They felt they were too low, and this led to an investigation on the part of the State Examinations Commission, and this is what they discovered. Now, the State Examinations Commission yesterday evening was keen to stress that what they have discovered is a procedural error. They say it is not a coding error, and that's important because people will remember last year when there were 3 serious coding errors discovered in the calculated grades process, which disadvantaged students and also really did serve to undermine the process. But the SEC is saying yesterday evening, it was saying this is different. This is an error that it came into play when an incorrect version of a programme was used. It says that it has undertaken further checking and looked across all results, and it's satisfied that the error only occurred in this one discrete area. So it's good news for 144 students because they have received an upgrade as a result of the correction. But it is unsettling, Audrey, because we're only a few days out from the Leaving Cert and already we have news of a mistake.
And a lot of talk in the last 24 hours, Emma, about the points, the CAO points. They are so high this year because of the grading process and because of demand for courses. We hear that a number of students who got the maximum number of points, 625, may not get their first choice. I mean, will there be any more places at this point, or will students have to defer?
We'll have to wait and see. The second round is out on September 20th. That's Monday week. Those students who were disappointed, and remember, they are a relatively small, they're the same number as they are every year, really, Audrey. 20% of students did not get one of their first 3 preferences this year. That is the same as previous years. But of course, it is very disappointing for those students. And we have this crazy anomaly this year where you have people who got top marks and didn't get their results, are now waiting for round 2. Now, there's one thing happening with round 2. There was a very high number of applications from students in other parts of the EU. There is a view based on previous patterns that a significant number of those applicants may not actually take up a place here, and there is a hope that that will free up places for people in this situation. But we have to remember, Audrey, the CAO is an unfair system. It's always an unfair system. I was contacted, for example, by a father of a child who got very good results, including a H1 in history, and that applicant did not secure a place to study history in Trinity. But that could have happened any year. So there is disappointment, and there is hope that perhaps round 2 will address some of this.
OK, Emma, thank you very much indeed. Emma O'Kelly, our education correspondent.